My name is Melinda, and at 34 years old, I stood in my $15,000 Valentino gown at the Sterling Foundation gala, watching my family mock and humiliate someone they thought was just the help, not knowing it was me. My mother Patricia ordered me to fetch champagne while my brother James loudly joked about charity cases who don't know their place. The crystal chandelier above reflected my diamond necklace as I smiled, knowing that in exactly 1 hour I would reveal that I owned the company that employed them all. Before we dive into this incredible story of transformation and sweet justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's ever been underestimated by your own family? Hit that like button if you believe in proving doubters wrong, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless, because sometimes the best revenge comes dressed in designer gowns and served with a side of cold, hard truth. Growing up as the disappointment in the prestigious Whitmore family taught me that blood doesn't always mean love. While my parents, Patricia and Richard, showered my siblings, James and Victoria, with affection and opportunities, I learned to find strength in solitude. At 8 years old, I woke up on my birthday to an empty house only to discover my parents had thrown a surprise party for James's soccer trophy that same weekend, telling me they forgot my special day because nothing about me was worth celebrating. The pattern continued relentlessly through my childhood, each slight cutting deeper than the last. By the time I turned 12, my mother had perfected the art of public humiliation. At our country club's annual charity auction, she introduced James and Victoria as her brilliant children, then paused when someone asked about me, forcing a laugh before saying I was adopted because she couldn't believe she'd given birth to someone so plain and unremarkable. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in uncomfortable laughter, and I stood there in my hand-me-down dress watching my mother sip champagne while my soul shattered into pieces I'm still finding today. High school brought new levels of cruelty when my father decided my education wasn't worth investing in. Despite maintaining a 3.8 GPA and scoring in the 95th percentile on my SATs, he sat me down in his mahogany-paneled office and explained that college funds were reserved for children who showed promise. James needed money for his Ivy League education, and Victoria required funds for her sorority life and study abroad programs. As for me, he suggested I consider community college, or perhaps skip higher education altogether, since in his words, some people were meant for simple lives, and there was no shame in accepting one's limitations. The breaking point came at 18 when my family staged what they called an intervention, but was really a coordinated attack on my sanity. They gathered aunts, uncles, and family friends in our living room, claiming I suffered from delusions of grandeur and needed psychological help for believing I could amount to anything significant. My mother cried crocodile tears about how painful it was to watch her daughter refuse to accept reality, while my siblings nodded solemnly, adding fabricated stories about my supposed mental instability. The psychiatrist they'd hired, Dr. Harrison, seemed puzzled when I calmly answered his questions and showed no signs of the disorders they'd described. But my family's money spoke louder than professional ethics. Everything changed when my grandmother Eleanor passed away. She was the only light in that darkness, the sole family member who saw potential in me and treated me with genuine love. Her funeral was the first time I'd cried in years, not just for losing her, but for losing my only advocate in a family determined to diminish me. The reading of her will should have been a simple affair, but nothing was ever simple with the Whitmores. When the lawyer announced that grandmother Eleanor had left me $50,000 and her collection of first edition books, the room exploded in outrage. My mother's face contorted with rage as she accused me of manipulating a sick elderly woman. James immediately began calculating what $50,000 meant to his lifestyle, while Victoria shrieked about fairness and family loyalty. They hired lawyers within days, contesting the will on grounds that I'd exercised undue influence over a woman suffering from dementia, despite medical records showing grandmother Eleanor was of sound mind until her final breath. The legal battle dragged on for 2 years, during which time they spread vicious rumors throughout our social circle that I was a gold-digging granddaughter who'd preyed on a vulnerable old woman's affections. During those 2 years of legal warfare, my family made sure every door in our affluent community slammed shut in my face. Job applications were mysteriously rejected, apartment rentals fell through at the last minute, and former friends crossed the street to avoid me. My father used his influence to blacklist me from local businesses, while my mother ensured her charity connections knew I was persona non grata. They wanted me broken, desperate, and ready to sign away my inheritance in exchange for their forgiveness and a chance to return to my proper place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. With $2,000 saved from secret tutoring jobs and a heart full of determination, I packed everything I owned into a battered Honda Civic and drove to Chicago. As the city skyline appeared on the horizon, I made myself a promise that I would never again allow anyone to have power over my worth. The Whitmores thought they'd destroyed me, but they'd actually freed me from the prison of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it. Little did they know their cruelty had forged a warrior who would one day return not for revenge, but for justice served at exactly the right temperature. The Chicago wind cut through my threadbare coat as I walked into my first job interview at a tech startup called Digital Dynamics. The position was for a night janitor, and the hiring manager barely looked up from his computer as he told me the job paid minimum wage and required working from midnight to 8 in the morning. I accepted, immediately grateful for any income while I attended community college during the day. My efficiency and attention to detail caught the attention of the overnight security guard Robert, who mentioned that the developers often left sensitive code visible on their screens, joking that a janitor could probably steal company secrets if they knew what they were looking at. 3 months into the job, while cleaning the server room, I noticed something that made my heart race. The company's main security protocol had a glaring vulnerability that could expose their entire client database. I spent my break documenting the issue in detail, then slipped an anonymous note under the CEO's door, explaining the problem and suggesting a solution. The next night, Marcus Chen, the company's 30-year-old founder, was waiting for me in the server room with a curious expression and my note in hand. Marcus didn't just offer me a job in the IT department that night. He offered me mentorship that would reshape my entire future. He saw past the exhausted janitor exterior to recognize a sharp mind hungry for knowledge. While continuing my night cleaning duties, he began teaching me coding, business strategy, and startup dynamics. When he learned I was struggling to afford textbooks for my business classes, he not only bought them, but also paid for me to transfer to Northwestern University, insisting it was an investment in talent, not charity. The next 4 years blurred together in a symphony of sleepless nights and relentless ambition. I maintained a perfect GPA while working full-time at Digital Dynamics, where Marcus had promoted me to junior developer, then project manager, then head of operations. My professors often used my projects as examples of innovative thinking, never knowing their star student went home to a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor and ramen noodles for dinner. The contrast between my days at Northwestern surrounded by wealthy students like my siblings and my nights grinding at the startup taught me that privilege was nothing compared to persistence. My breakthrough came during my MBA program when a supply chain inefficiency at Digital Dynamics sparked an idea that kept me awake for 3 straight days. I developed an algorithm that could predict and prevent bottlenecks in complex distribution networks, potentially saving companies millions in lost revenue and delayed shipments. Marcus was the first person I showed the prototype to, and his eyes widened as he realized the implications. Within a week, he'd connected me with venture capitalists from his network, coaching me through pitch meetings that would determine whether my idea remained a thesis project or became a revolution. The first investor meeting was a disaster. I walked into a conference room full of men who looked like older versions of my father, and my carefully rehearsed pitch crumbled under their skeptical stares. One particularly condescending partner asked if I really understood the complexity of enterprise software, suggesting perhaps I should consider a nice position in marketing instead. But Marcus had taught me well, and instead of retreating, I pulled up my laptop and demonstrated the algorithm in real time, showing how it could have prevented 3 major supply chain failures that had made headlines that year. By the end of the demonstration, that same condescending partner was calculating potential returns on his phone. Nexus Solutions Incorporated, with $5 million in seed funding and a determination to disrupt an industry dominated by legacy players like my family's company. I made 2 crucial decisions early on that would define everything that followed. First, I would remain anonymous, operating through shell companies and trusts to keep my identity hidden from competitors, and, more importantly, from my family. Second, I would build a company culture opposite to everything I'd experienced growing up, where talent was recognized regardless of background, and loyalty was earned through respect, not demanded through blood. The early days of Nexus Solutions tested every ounce of strength I'd built during those lonely years. We operated out of a converted warehouse where I often slept on an air mattress between coding sessions that stretched for 18 hours. My team of 5 brilliant misfits, all hungry developers whom traditional companies had overlooked, worked with the fervor of true believers. We survived on pizza, energy drinks, and the shared conviction that we were building something revolutionary. When our first major client, a Fortune 500 retailer, signed a contract worth $2 million, we celebrated with champagne in plastic cups, none of us imagining that within 5 years, we'd be acquiring the very companies that had once rejected us. Strategic growth required playing chess, while others played checkers. I studied my family's industry obsessively, mapping out every supplier, partner, and competitor in their network. Through Marcus's connections, I met Sandra Williams, a brilliant strategist who'd been pushed out of a major consulting firm for refusing to play politics. Sandra became my COO and confidant, the only person besides Marcus who knew my full story. Together, we identified acquisition targets that seemed unrelated, but would eventually form a net around Whitmore Industries, though they'd never see it coming until it was far too late to escape. The acquisition strategy was surgical in its precision. We started with peripheral companies, the ones Whitmore Industries used, but didn't consider threats. A logistics firm here, a software provider there. Each purchase made under different shell companies to avoid pattern recognition. My favorite acquisition was Thornton Supplies, my family's primary vendor for 20 years. The owner, Gregory Thornton, had been repeatedly disrespected by my father and jumped at the chance to sell to a buyer who valued his legacy. He never knew the anonymous buyer was Richard Whitmore's discarded daughter, but he did mention during negotiations how satisfying it would be to watch the Whitmores scramble when they realized their supply chain had new management. 5 years after leaving with $2,000 and a broken heart, I controlled an empire worth $800 million. Nexus Solutions had evolved from a single algorithm to a comprehensive suite of supply chain solutions used by 40% of American retailers. My employees numbered over 500 each one, chosen for their talent and hunger, rather than their pedigree. The financial press speculated endlessly about the mysterious M. Sterling, who built an empire from shadows. But I remained a ghost, communicating only through Sandra, and a carefully managed digital presence that revealed nothing personal. The sweetest victory came through Jonathan Pierce, a forensic accountant who'd discovered irregularities at Whitmore Industries during a routine audit. My father had fired him immediately, threatening to destroy his career if he spoke about what he'd found. Jonathan reached out to Nexus Solutions looking for work, and I hired him instantly, not just for his skills, but for his inside knowledge of my family's financial vulnerabilities. Through Jonathan, I learned that Whitmore Industries was hemorrhaging money propped up only by creative accounting and my father's reputation. James had been siphoning funds to cover gambling debts, while Victoria's husband had been using company resources for his side ventures. The empire my grandfather built was rotting from within, destroyed by the very entitlement my parents had cultivated in their favored children. As I sat in my corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing the latest quarterly reports that showed Nexus Solutions outperforming every projection, I felt no satisfaction yet. Building this empire had been about survival and proving my worth to myself, but there was one more move to make. The Sterling Foundation, my newly established philanthropic arm, would host its inaugural gala in 3 months. It would be the social event of the season, attracting everyone who mattered in our industry. And the Whitmore family, desperate to network their way out of financial ruin, would definitely attend. They just didn't know they'd be coming to their own professional funeral, orchestrated by the daughter they'd thrown away like garbage. 3 months before the Sterling Foundation Gala, I initiated the final phase of my carefully orchestrated plan. Through a complex series of proxy purchases and hostile takeover maneuvers that would have made Gordon Gekko proud, Nexus Solutions acquired 51% of Whitmore Industries. The beauty of the acquisition lay in its invisibility. Shares were purchased through 17 different investment firms across 8 countries. Each transaction small enough to avoid regulatory attention, but collectively adding up to controlling interest. My family woke up one morning owned by a ghost they didn't believe in, still blissfully unaware that their dismissed daughter now held their professional fate in her manicured hands. The irony of Jonathan Pierce serving as my inside man never ceased to amaze me. My father had created his own worst enemy by firing a good man for doing his job with integrity. Through Jonathan's meticulous documentation, I learned the full extent of my family's financial crimes and moral bankruptcy. James had embezzled nearly $3 million over 5 years, funding a gambling addiction that included high-stakes poker games with Russian oligarchs who didn't accept IOUs lightly. Victoria's husband Daniel had been using Whitmore Industries as collateral for personal real estate ventures that went belly up, leaving the company liable for debts it never authorized. The spreadsheets told a story of entitlement rotting into criminality, exactly what happened when children were taught they deserved everything without earning anything. But the financial crimes paled compared to the personal betrayals Jonathan uncovered through company emails and security footage. Victoria's husband Daniel wasn't just bad at business. He was having an affair with Karen James's wife of 8 years. The security cameras meant to protect company property had captured them in compromising positions in the executive conference room multiple times. Meanwhile, James knew about the affair and was using it as leverage to force Daniel to sign off on fraudulent expense reports. My family had become a snake eating its own tail, destroying each other with the same casual cruelty they'd once reserved for me. The gala planning began in earnest 10 weeks before the event. I hired Beverly Morrison, the most sought-after event planner in Chicago, known for creating experiences that became legendary in social circles. When I explained my vision for the evening, including specific seating arrangements and timing for various announcements, Beverly's eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement reserved for those who appreciated elaborate theater. She understood immediately that this wasn't just a charity gala, but a carefully choreographed performance where every detail mattered, from the champagne selection to the spotlight angles during speeches. The invitation list was curated with surgical precision. Every major player in our industry received handcrafted invitations on paper embedded with gold leaf, making it clear this was not an event to miss. Technology billionaires, senators, foreign dignitaries, and media moguls all RSVP'd within days. But the most important invitations went to the Whitmore family, delivered by courier, with a personal note from the Sterling Foundation expressing how honored we'd be by their attendance as recognized leaders in the industry. My mother probably framed hers, never suspecting it was actually a beautifully decorated summons to her own humiliation. Sandra and I spent countless hours rehearsing every possible scenario for the reveal. We practiced my speech until each word carried the perfect balance of professional triumph and personal vindication. We arranged for discreet security personnel who knew to watch for potential violence, as I fully expected James to lose control when he realized what had happened. Professional videographers would capture every moment under the guise of documenting the gala for the Foundation's website, ensuring that whatever transpired would be preserved in high definition for posterity, and, if necessary, legal proceedings. The transformation of Melinda Whitmore began 6 weeks before the gala, when I flew to Los Angeles to work with Hollywood's premier transformation team. The same stylists who created looks for Oscar winners spent 3 days determining the perfect hair color, cut, and style to maximize my features. A makeup artist who'd worked with supermodels taught me techniques that would ensure I looked flawless under the gala's lighting. The dress selection process involved trying on dozens of designer gowns until we found the Valentino piece that made me look like the billionaire I'd become, rather than the discarded daughter I'd been. Physical transformation was only part of the preparation. I worked with a voice coach to ensure my presentation carried the authority my position demanded. A body language expert helped me perfect the kind of presence that commanded rooms without saying a word. These weren't attempts to become someone else, but rather efforts to reveal who I'd always been underneath the layers of rejection and dismissal. The ugly duckling narrative was wrong. I'd never been ugly, just unseen by people who refused to look past their own prejudices. 1 week before the gala, I orchestrated a series of unfortunate events for Whitmore Industries that would ensure my family arrived desperate and vulnerable. Their CFO, whom I'd quietly recruited months earlier, submitted his resignation effective immediately, citing ethical concerns about company practices. Within hours, their biggest client, Meridian Retail Group, whose CEO owed me several favors, terminated their contract, citing breach of service-level agreements. By the end of the day, 3 major banks had called in loans totaling $40 million, having mysteriously lost confidence in Whitmore Industries' ability to repay. The family emergency meeting, which I watched through security cameras Jonathan had never disabled, was everything I'd hoped for. My father raged about conspiracies and corporate sabotage, while my mother wept dramatically about losing their social standing. James accused Victoria's husband of sabotaging the company for his own gain, while Victoria screamed about James's gambling debts destroying their legacy. They turned on each other like rabid dogs, each blaming the others for their downfall, never once considering that their real enemy might be the daughter they'd discarded like yesterday's trash. As the gala approached, my family's desperation reached comic levels. They spent money they didn't have on new formal wear, hoping to project success and stability to potential investors. My mother had her jewelry cleaned and borrowed pieces from friends to appear more prosperous. James practiced his elevator pitch in the mirror, preparing to beg for capital from anyone who'd listen. They saw the Sterling Foundation Gala as their last chance to save Whitmore Industries, never suspecting they'd already lost everything to someone they considered worthless. The night before the gala, I stood in my penthouse apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, holding a glass of the same champagne my mother had splashed on me at my 13th birthday party, when she'd had too much to drink and decided to toast all her children except one. Tomorrow, everything would come full circle. Tomorrow, the girl they'd called worthless would reveal herself as their worst nightmare and greatest lesson. Tomorrow, I would serve them a feast of consequences seasoned with their own cruelty and garnished with poetic justice. The Sterling Foundation Gala began at 7 o'clock sharp on a crisp September evening, with Chicago's elite arriving in a parade of luxury vehicles that turned the hotel entrance into an impromptu car show. I arrived 90 minutes early, using the time to ensure every detail was perfect and to center myself for what was about to unfold. The ballroom looked like something from a dream, with thousands of crystals hanging from the ceiling, creating a galaxy of light above tables dressed in silver and midnight blue. Every flower arrangement, every place card, every angle of lighting had been personally approved to create an atmosphere of understated opulence that would make my family's humiliation even more stark against such elegance. I positioned myself strategically near the registration table, greeting early arrivals with the confidence of someone who belonged in this world because I'd built my place in it with my own hands. Thomas Crawford, the tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized payment processing, arrived first and immediately engaged me in conversation about supply chain innovations. Senator Williams followed, complimenting the foundation's mission to support overlooked talent in technology fields. Neither knew they were speaking to Monsieur Sterling herself. They simply saw a sophisticated woman who clearly belonged among the industry's power players. My family arrived fashionably late at 8:15, sweeping into the ballroom with the kind of false confidence that only barely masked their desperation. My mother wore a burgundy gown that had probably cost more than they could afford her diamonds, glittering with the intensity of someone trying too hard to prove they still mattered. Father's tuxedo was impeccable, but his eyes darted around the room like a predator seeking prey, clearly hunting for potential investors. James looked bloated from stress and alcohol, his bow tie already askew, while Victoria clutched her husband's arm with white knuckles, her frozen smile not reaching her eyes that scanned for opportunities. The moment I'd anticipated for years arrived when I strategically positioned myself near the service station, just as my mother approached the champagne display. I wore my hair differently than in my youth, my posture transformed by confidence and success. My entire presence so unlike the cowering girl they'd known that recognition was impossible. As I reached for a glass at the same moment she did, our hands nearly touched, and she recoiled with the particular disgust reserved for those she considered beneath her station. Patricia Whitmore looked me up and down with the calculating gaze of someone determining whether I was worth acknowledging and finding me wanting. Despite my $15,000 gown and million-dollar jewelry, she made her verdict. Her voice, pitched to carry to nearby guests, dripped with the casual cruelty I remembered so well as she addressed me like hired help, never once considering that someone she'd dismissed could be anything more than what she'd decided they were. The champagne glass trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation of knowing her world was about to collapse. "You there," she snapped, mistaking my proximity to the service area as proof of my employment status. "This champagne is warm. Fetch me a properly chilled bottle immediately. And while you're at it, bring 4 glasses to our table. The tall flutes, not these coupes. Honestly, the quality of help these days is appalling." She turned to a nearby couple, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You simply cannot find good staff anymore. They hire anyone off the street without proper training. This one doesn't even have the sense to circulate properly. She's just standing here like a statue." I inclined my head slightly, the gesture she took for subservience, but which was actually barely controlled amusement, and moved toward the service bar. Behind me, I heard her continue her performance for anyone within earshot, explaining how charity events always suffered from poor staffing, because they insisted on hiring from disadvantaged communities who didn't understand proper service. The irony of her complaining about charity hiring at a charity event was lost on her, but not on the senator's wife, who shot her a disapproving look that Patricia was too self-absorbed to notice. James materialized beside me at the service bar, already 3 drinks deep, judging by his flushed face and slightly swaying stance. He looked at me with the unfocused eyes of someone who saw only what they expected to see, which in his case was an attractive server he could harass without consequences. "Well, hello there," he slurred, leaning too close and breathing bourbon fumes in my direction. "Aren't you a pretty little thing, working hard or hardly working?" He laughed at his own pathetic joke, then continued. "You know I own a major company, Whitmore Industries. Maybe you've heard of it. I could use a personal assistant. Someone like you could do very well working under me. And I do mean under me." His leer made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure, knowing his degradation was imminent. The situation escalated when I returned with their champagne balanced on a silver tray I'd commandeered from an actual server, who was happy to let a guest help after I'd slipped him a $100 bill. Victoria had joined the group, and upon seeing me approach, immediately began her own performance of superiority. "Finally," she sighed dramatically. "James, can you believe how long it takes to get a simple drink order? I swear it's like they pulled these people off the street. Look at how she's holding that tray completely wrong. And that walk, my God. You can always tell breeding, can't you, or the lack thereof." As I distributed the champagne flutes, careful to maintain the facade of service, my father decided to join the family tradition of casual cruelty. Richard Whitmore, the man whose rejection had once devastated me, now seemed pathetically small as he performed his authority for an audience that was increasingly uncomfortable with the display. "You've spilled champagne on the tray," he announced, though I hadn't. "Clean it up immediately. And then find your supervisor. This level of incompetence is unacceptable. I'll be speaking to the event coordinator about the quality of staff they've hired. People like you give charity workers a bad name." The next escalation came when Victoria, emboldened by wine and desperation, decided to document what she perceived as incompetent service for her social media followers. She pulled out her phone, not bothering to be discreet as she filmed me cleaning the imaginary spill from the tray. This is what happens when events try to be politically correct with their hiring, she narrated to her phone. This server has been getting our orders wrong all night, and now she's made a mess. I'm definitely leaving a review about this. The Sterling Foundation should be ashamed of their staff choices. She turned the camera on my face expecting to capture humiliation, but instead recorded calm professionalism that would later contrast beautifully with her own unraveling. The culmination of their collective cruelty came when James, now even drunker and bolder, decided to demonstrate his supposed power by creating a scene. As I moved past their table, he stuck out his foot, a childish trick that caught me off guard and sent me stumbling forward. I recovered gracefully, years of ballet lessons in childhood serving me well, but not before the remaining champagne on the tray splashed onto the pristine tablecloth. The sound drew attention from surrounding tables, creating the audience James wanted for his performance of dominance. "Look what you've done now!" Patricia's voice rose to a pitch that made nearby guests wince. "This is our table, and you've ruined it with your clumsiness. This is what happens when foundations insist on inclusive hiring. Some people simply aren't meant for civilized settings." She turned to a passing staff member, a young man who looked horrified by the scene. "Fetch your manager immediately. This person needs to be removed from the premises. She's clearly intoxicated or impaired in some way. I want her fired tonight. The Sterling Foundation will be hearing from our lawyers if she isn't terminated immediately." The final twist of the knife came from Victoria, who decided to pile on with fabricated complaints designed to ensure maximum damage to what she assumed was my livelihood. "She's been harassing us all evening," she announced loudly, playing victim with the skill of someone raised on manipulation. "Following us around, listening to our conversations, making inappropriate comments. I think she might be mentally unstable. Someone should check if she's even supposed to be working here or if she's some crasher who grabbed a uniform. I feel unsafe with her presence. This is stalking behavior." What my family didn't notice in their feeding frenzy of cruelty was the growing discomfort of those around them. Thomas Crawford watched the display with barely concealed disgust, his expression suggesting he was reconsidering any potential business dealings with people who treated service staff so abhorrently. Senator Williams whispered something to his wife, both of them shooting disapproving glances at my family's table. Even other guests who didn't know me personally were visibly uncomfortable with the level of vitriol being directed at someone they perceived as a service worker just trying to do her job. Sandra appeared at my elbow during the height of their performance, playing her part as my concerned COO checking on a valued colleague. "Ms. Sterling," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, using my professional name rather than my full identity. "The board members from Tokyo have arrived and are asking for you. Shall I have security escort these individuals out if they're bothering you?" The use of my surname caused a ripple of confusion through those close enough to hear, but my family was too deep in their own drama to notice the shift in atmosphere around them. I placed a gentle hand on Sandra's arm, pitched my voice to carry just far enough, and delivered my response with perfect calm. "That won't be necessary, Sandra. I'm sure the Whitmore family is just having a difficult evening. We should show compassion for those facing hard times." The words were calculated to sting, delivered with a smile that never wavered. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, something niggling at her consciousness, but not quite breaking through her assumptions. "Please tell the board members I'll join them shortly. I just need to ensure our guests have everything they require." As I walked away from their table, leaving them to their champagne and cruelty, I heard James making one final crude comment about my figure and what he'd like to do with it. Victoria laughed shrilly while adding her own observations about how some people needed to know their place in society. My parents nodded approvingly, satisfied they'd put an uppity server in her position, and demonstrated their own superiority. They had no idea they'd just signed their own professional death warrant in front of witnesses who would remember every word when the truth was revealed in precisely 43 minutes. The master of ceremonies, renowned journalist Catherine Chen, commanded the room's attention at precisely 9:30, with the natural authority of someone who'd interviewed presidents and billionaires with equal ease. The conversations gradually died down as she took the podium, her silver gown catching the light as she smiled at the assembled crowd of industry titans and social elite. Behind her, massive screens displayed the Sterling Foundation logo, a sophisticated design that incorporated elements suggesting both growth and transformation, though no one yet understood just how personal that transformation was for the evening's mysterious host. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began, her voice carrying clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Tonight, we celebrate not just philanthropy, but the power of recognizing potential where others see only limitations. The Sterling Foundation was created by someone who understands intimately that talent exists everywhere, waiting only for opportunity to flourish." Before we hear from our foundation's founder, let me share some remarkable achievements that have redefined what's possible in our industry. The lights dimmed strategically as the presentation began, drawing every eye to the screens that now displayed a timeline of Nexus Solutions' meteoric rise. The company's origin story carefully edited to maintain my anonymity, while highlighting the journey from a single algorithm to an empire unfolded in compelling graphics and statistics. Gasps rippled through the audience as the numbers revealed themselves: 800 million in revenue, 40% market penetration, 500 employees lifted from overlooked backgrounds to successful careers. Even I felt a surge of pride watching my life's work validated in such undeniable terms. The presentation shifted to show Nexus Solutions' expanding network of acquisitions and partnerships, each company appearing on screen like pieces of an elaborate puzzle coming together. Those familiar with the industry began to recognize the strategic brilliance of the expansion pattern, how each acquisition strengthened the whole while weakening specific competitors. When Whitmore Industries appeared on screen as the latest acquisition highlighted in gold as a recent strategic investment, I watched my family's table with peripheral vision, savoring the moment their faces changed. My father saw it first, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his lips as he processed what the screen revealed. The color drained from his face in real time, creating a stark contrast to his black tuxedo, as he leaned forward, squinting at the screen, as if proximity might change the reality of what he was seeing. His hand trembled slightly as he set down the glass, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish removed from water, struggling to breathe in an environment that had suddenly become hostile to his existence. James followed seconds later, his alcohol-foggy brain taking longer to process the implications. When understanding finally dawned, he shot to his feet so abruptly his chair toppled backward, creating a crash that drew attention from surrounding tables. "That's impossible," he said loudly enough for half the room to hear his voice cracking with disbelief and rising panic. "This is some kind of mistake. We weren't acquired. We would know. I would know. I'm the executive vice president, for God's sake. This is wrong. The presentation is wrong." Victoria's reaction was more contained but no less dramatic, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her husband's arm hard enough to leave marks through his tuxedo jacket. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and growing horror as she pulled out her phone, frantically searching for confirmation of what couldn't possibly be true. The light from her screen illuminated her face from below, creating shadows that made her expression even more ghoulish as she found the SEC filings that confirmed everything. The acquisition had been completed, filed, and formalized while they'd been obliviously planning their outfit choices for tonight's gala. Patricia's response was perhaps the most satisfying to witness. My mother, who'd spent decades perfecting her image of unshakable superiority, began to physically crumble as the implications cascaded through her consciousness. Her shoulders sagged, her careful posture collapsing as she gripped the edge of the table for support. The burgundy gown that had seemed so regal now looked like costume jewelry on someone exposed as a fraud. Her diamonds catching the light like tears she was too proud to shed in public, but that would surely come later in private. Catherine Chen continued her introduction, blissfully unaware of the family drama unfolding in the audience, or perhaps professionally ignoring it with the skill of someone used to managing live television crises. The success of Nexus Solutions represents more than financial achievement. It's a testament to what happens when we look beyond traditional markers of potential, when we invest in brilliance regardless of its origins. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing someone who built an empire, not in spite of being overlooked, but because being dismissed taught them to see opportunities others missed. The screens behind Catherine began displaying photos from Nexus Solutions corporate events and milestones carefully curated to show the company's culture and achievements without revealing my identity. There I was photographed from behind at the ribbon cutting for our new headquarters. There was my silhouette against a window overlooking the Chicago skyline during a Forbes interview where I'd remained famously anonymous. Each image built anticipation while maintaining the mystery, a slow reveal designed to maximize impact when the final truth emerged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine announced with a flourish worthy of the moment, "please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Nexus Solutions, the visionary behind the Sterling Foundation, the shepherd of overlooked talent and builder of impossible dreams, Monsieur Sterling." The spotlight swung to find me as I rose from my strategic position, no longer near the service area, but at table 1 where I'd been sitting among senators and billionaires who'd been chatting with me as an equal all evening without knowing they were speaking to their host. The walk to the stage stretched before me like a runway of vindication. Each step carried the weight of every rejection, every humiliation, every moment they'd tried to convince me I was worthless. My Valentino gown moved like liquid gold under the lights, the diamonds at my throat catching fire with each movement. I kept my eyes forward, my posture perfect, my expression serene, but I felt rather than saw the moment my family recognized me. The collective intake of breath from their table was audible even over the applause, a sound I'd remember for the rest of my life as the symphony of their realization. My mother's champagne glass shattered against the floor, the crystal exploding into fragments that sparkled like her crumbling illusions. The sound cut through the applause, causing nearby guests to turn toward the disturbance just in time to see Patricia Whitmore, society matron and self-appointed judge of worth, swaying on her feet like someone had physically struck her. Her mouth formed my name, silently testing it, as if saying it aloud might make this impossible reality dissolve back into the nightmare it surely must be for her. James lunged toward the stage, but made it only 2 steps before Thomas Crawford and another guest restrained him. Whether out of concern for his well-being or protection for mine, I neither knew nor cared. His face had turned an alarming shade of purple, veins bulging at his temples as he struggled against the restraining hands. "That's my sister," he shouted, as if claiming connection to me now might somehow undo the chasm they'd carved between us. "That's Melinda. She can't be. This isn't. Someone explain what's happening. This is some kind of trick. She's nobody. She's nothing. We made sure of that." The last words hung in the air like a confession heard by hundreds of witnesses who would remember them long after tonight ended. Victoria tried to silence him, her own face a mask of horror as she realized how his outbursts sounded to the assembled elite, but the damage was done. Their masks had slipped, revealing the cruel truth beneath the polished veneer, and everyone present was seeing exactly who the Whitmore family really was beneath their pretensions to class and breeding. I reached the podium with measured steps, accepting Catherine's congratulations with a gracious smile before turning to face the audience. The teleprompter held my prepared remarks, but I didn't need them. Every word had been burned into my memory through countless rehearsals, each sentence crafted to tell my story, while maintaining the dignity they'd tried to steal from me. The microphone captured my steady breathing as I waited for the applause to die down, using the moment to make eye contact with key figures in the audience while deliberately avoiding my family's table, saving that satisfaction for the perfect moment still to come. Standing at the podium with hundreds of eyes upon me, I let the silence stretch just long enough to build anticipation before beginning the speech that would reshape everything. "Good evening, distinguished guests, partners, and..." I paused finally, allowing my gaze to find my family's table. Family. My voice carried clear and strong through the ballroom, years of voice coaching evident in the way it commanded attention without straining. Some of you know me as M. Sterling, the entrepreneur who prefers boardrooms to ballrooms. Others have come to know me tonight as someone who appreciates both good champagne and better conversation. But there are 4 people here who once knew me by a different name entirely. The screens behind me began displaying carefully chosen childhood photographs as I continued. I was born Melinda Whitmore, the youngest child of Richard and Patricia Whitmore's sister, to James and Victoria. For 18 years, I had the dubious privilege of learning exactly how cruel family could be when they decided you didn't meet their standards. Every birthday forgotten, every achievement dismissed, every dream mocked became fuel for a fire they never thought could burn bright enough to matter. Tonight, I stand before you not as their discarded daughter, but as the owner of their company, living proof that worth isn't determined by those too blind to see it. A photo appeared showing my grandmother Eleanor and me at my high school graduation, the only family member who'd attended. The only person who believed in me was my grandmother Eleanor, whose memory we honor tonight through the Sterling Foundation. When she passed, my family contested her modest bequest to me, claiming I'd manipulated a dying woman. They tied up $50,000 in legal battles for 2 years, spreading rumors that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. What they never understood was that grandmother Eleanor didn't leave me money. She left me the knowledge that one person's belief could be enough to change everything. The presentation shifted to document my journey from janitor to CEO, with dated photographs and achievement certificates that proved every claim. I started as a night janitor at a tech startup, studying code on breaks and attending community college during the day. When I discovered a critical security flaw in the company's system, the CEO, Marcus Chen, recognized potential where others saw only a cleaning woman. He became my mentor, my investor, and the father figure my biological father never was. Every success I've achieved stands as testament to what happens when talent meets opportunity instead of obstruction. The screen now showed a timeline of strategic acquisitions, each company appearing as a piece of an elaborate chess match. 5 years ago, I began acquiring companies strategically positioned around Whitmore Industries. Thornton Supply's Meridian Logistics, Hampton Securities, each purchase made through shell companies to maintain anonymity. 6 months ago, we acquired Pemberton Financial, Whitmore Industries' primary lender. 3 months ago, we achieved controlling interest in Whitmore Industries itself through a carefully orchestrated hostile takeover that your board of directors couldn't prevent because they never saw it coming from someone they'd been trained to ignore. I clicked a remote that revealed financial documents on screen showing the full scope of my family's mismanagement and malfeasance. Through forensic accounting, we discovered some disturbing truths about Whitmore Industries' operations. James Whitmore embezzled $3.2 million over 5 years to fund gambling debts to extremely dangerous people. Victoria's husband Daniel used company assets as collateral for personal investments that failed spectacularly, leaving the company liable for millions in unauthorized debt. The financial statements shown here have been provided to federal prosecutors who assure me indictments are forthcoming. The room had gone completely silent, except for the scratching of journalists' pens and the soft whir of cameras capturing every moment. But financial crimes pale compared to personal cruelties. I continued as the screen displayed email exchanges between my family members discussing their plans to destroy me. These emails, retrieved from Whitmore Industries' servers, show a coordinated campaign to ruin my reputation, block my employment opportunities, and convince the community I was mentally unstable. They hired a psychiatrist to diagnose me with disorders I didn't have. They contacted employers to spread lies about my character. They attempted to have me institutionalized to gain control of my inheritance. A new slide appeared showing security footage from earlier this evening. What you're seeing now is footage from 90 minutes ago when my family mistook me for service staff and proceeded to humiliate, threaten, and attempt to have me fired from a job I didn't have. My mother called me worthless. My brother propositioned me and then physically tripped me. My sister filmed me for social media mockery. My father demanded my termination for imagined incompetence. They showed you exactly who they are when they think no one important is watching, which is why I made sure everyone important was watching. The screens now displayed charts showing Whitmore Industries' restructuring plan alongside the Sterling Foundation's expansion. Effective Monday morning. Whitmore Industries will undergo complete restructuring. The executive team, including all family members, will be terminated for cause based on documented malfeasance. Criminal charges are being filed for embezzlement fraud and harassment. The company will be absorbed into Nexus Solutions, where its employees will be evaluated based on merit rather than nepotism. Those who performed despite toxic leadership will find opportunities to thrive. Those who participated in the culture of cruelty will find their services no longer required. I paused to survey the room, noting the mix of shock, admiration, and in some cases recognition from those who'd experienced similar family betrayals. Some might ask why I'm sharing this painful history so publicly. The answer is simple: silence protects abusers and isolates victims. Every person watching who's been told they're worthless by people who should have loved them needs to know that rejection isn't reflection. Your worth isn't determined by those too small to see it. Your potential isn't limited by those threatened by it. Your future isn't defined by those who tried to steal it. The final slide appeared showing the Sterling Foundation's mission statement and first year's recipients. The Sterling Foundation will provide $100 million over the next 5 years to support young people whose families failed them. Scholarships for those denied education, mentorship for those denied guidance, and most importantly, belief for those denied hope. We've already identified our first 1,000 recipients, each one dismissed by family, but determined to succeed despite that abandonment. They are tomorrow's CEOs, inventors, and leaders waiting only for someone to see what their families couldn't. Now came the moment I'd rehearsed most carefully. To my family, I want you to know that I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying hatred would mean allowing you to still have power over me, and your power ended the day I chose to bet on myself instead of begging for your approval. James, the gambling debts to the Bratva will be paid to prevent physical harm, but criminal prosecution will proceed. Victoria, your husband's affairs and financial crimes are his to answer for, but perhaps this will free you to find someone who values you more than your trust fund. Mother and father, you'll face justice for your crimes. But more importantly, you'll face the knowledge that the daughter you called worthless is worth more than your entire legacy combined. As I spoke their names, security guards had quietly positioned themselves around my family's table. James attempted to stand again, but found firm hands on his shoulders, keeping him seated. Victoria was openly weeping, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. My father sat frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and rage warring for dominance. But it was my mother's expression that struck me most forcefully, the dawning realization that every cruelty had been witnessed, recorded, and would now follow her for the rest of her life. The Eleanor Whitmore Memorial Fund launches tonight with a specific mission. I announced, clicking to show the Foundation's website going live in real time. We'll support young people aged 16 to 25 whose families have rejected them for any reason: their dreams, their identity, their refusal to accept abuse as love. Each recipient will receive full education, funding, mentorship from industry leaders, and most importantly, a community that celebrates their potential instead of crushing it. The fund begins with $100 million. But I expect that number to grow as others who've walked this path join our mission. The screen behind me now showed a live feed of the Foundation's website as donations began pouring in from viewers watching the live stream. For those wondering about the name, yes, we're using the Whitmore name deliberately. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, represented everything good that family name could have meant: kindness, wisdom, unconditional love. By attaching her name to this fund, we reclaim it from those who corrupted it with cruelty. My family cannot legally contest this usage, though I'm certain they'll try. They're quite experienced at contesting wills, after all. I looked directly at my family for the first time since taking the stage, allowing myself a moment to truly see them as they were small, petty people, whose power had always been an illusion, built on inherited wealth, and maintained through cruelty. You spent so much energy trying to convince me I was nothing that you never noticed you were creating everything I would become. Every insult became motivation. Every locked door taught me to build my own. Every time you told me to know my place, you ensured I'd create my own. So thank you for the cruelty that forged my strength. Thank you for the rejection that taught me self-reliance. Thank you for showing me exactly who I never wanted to become. The final slide appeared showing contact information for the foundation and a QR code for immediate donations. To everyone else here tonight, I ask you to remember that talent exists everywhere, waiting to be recognized and nurtured. The next time you encounter someone struggling against family rejection, professional dismissal, or societal prejudice, consider being the Marcus Chen in their story. The mentor who sees potential where others see problems. The investor who bets on brilliance regardless of its packaging. The friend who believes when blood relatives betray. Together, we can create a world where worth isn't inherited, but earned, where potential isn't pedigreed, but proven, where family isn't just blood but chosen. As I concluded my speech, the room erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to physically push my family deeper into their chairs. Thank you for sharing this evening with me. Please enjoy the rest of the gala, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success so complete that those who doubted you become footnotes in your story, rather than authors of it. Tonight, we close one chapter and begin another, not with bitterness, but with billion-dollar proof that believing in yourself is the best investment you'll ever make. The immediate aftermath of my revelation unfolded with the precise choreography of a well-rehearsed play. Security personnel, discreet but firm, escorted my family from the ballroom, as Catherine Chen smoothly resumed her role as Master of Ceremonies, transitioning the program to the Foundation's grant recipients, as if public family implosions were standard gala entertainment. Through the ballroom's glass doors, I caught a glimpse of James struggling against the security guards, his face contorted with rage, while Patricia clutched her pearls like prayer beads, her mouth moving in what appeared to be either curses or desperate negotiations with a god who'd clearly chosen different favorites than she'd expected. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and business card exchanges. Thomas Crawford approached first, his expression mixing admiration with something deeper, perhaps recognition of a kindred spirit who'd built success from rejection's ashes. "That was either the bravest or most dangerous thing I've ever witnessed," he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "I walked away from my family at 19 with nothing but ambition. Took me 20 years to build what you've done in 10. If you ever want to compare notes on turning family trauma into fortune, I'd be honored to buy you dinner somewhere that doesn't serve revenge as the main course." Senator Williams and his wife joined our conversation, the senator's political instincts, recognizing a story that would resonate with constituents who'd faced similar struggles. "Ms. Sterling, that was remarkable. I've been pushing legislation to support young people estranged from families, but I've been fighting statistics with statistics. What you've given us tonight is a story, and stories change hearts in ways numbers never could. Would you consider testifying before the Senate Committee on Youth Services? Your foundation's work could transform how we approach family estrangement and youth homelessness." The rest of the evening became a masterclass in networking with purpose. 3 major tech CEOs committed to funding the Sterling Foundation before dessert arrived. A Hollywood producer mentioned interest in adapting my story for film, though I politely declined, explaining that my story wasn't entertainment, but education for those walking similar paths. By midnight, the foundation had received pledges totaling $40 million from guests moved by either the mission or the spectacle, and I found myself caring less about their motivations than their money's potential to help others escape situations like mine. The next morning brought the inevitable media storm. My phone buzzed with interview requests from every major outlet, while Sandra fielded calls from reporters seeking additional dirt on the Whitmore family disaster. We'd prepared a simple statement that directed attention to the foundation's mission rather than the family drama. Though tabloids ran with headlines like "Billionaire's Revenge Served Ice Cold" and "Discarded Daughter's Delicious Destruction of Cruel Clan." The video of my family's treatment of me as help went viral within hours, becoming a touchstone for discussions about class cruelty and comeuppance that stretched far beyond our personal drama. James's arrest came Tuesday morning, federal agents taking him from his Lake Forest mansion in handcuffs, while neighbors pretended not to watch through their windows. The embezzlement charges were ironclad, supported by years of meticulous documentation that Jonathan Pierce had assembled with the dedication of someone who understood that justice required patience and precision. The gambling debts to Russian oligarchs added another layer of legal complexity that would keep James entangled in court for years, his assets frozen, while forensic accountants traced every stolen dollar through offshore accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. My parents' response was predictably narcissistic. They hired the most expensive law firm in Chicago to fight the corporate takeover, claiming I'd manipulated stock prices through insider trading and emotional manipulation. The irony of them accusing me of manipulation while they'd spent decades gaslighting me wasn't lost on anyone, particularly the judge who dismissed their initial filing with prejudice. Patricia gave a disastrous interview to a Society magazine where she claimed I'd been troubled since childhood, and that they'd only wanted to help me understand my limitations for my own good, a quote that became infamous as an example of parental delusion and cruelty disguised as concern. Victoria surprised me by reaching out through her divorce attorney, a brilliant woman named Janet Rodriguez, who specialized in helping women escape toxic marriages. The message was simple. Victoria wanted to apologize and understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but she needed me to know that watching her carefully constructed life collapse had finally opened her eyes to how our parents had poisoned everything they touched. She was leaving Daniel pressing charges for financial fraud and entering therapy to understand why she'd participated in destroying the only sister she'd ever have. I didn't respond immediately, but I kept the letter, filling it under possibilities rather than impossibilities. The Sterling Foundation's launch exceeded every projection. Within the first week, we received over 10,000 applications from young people whose stories echoed mine in heartbreaking variations. Parents who'd disowned children for their sexuality, their career choices, their refusal to accept abuse as tradition. Families who'd stolen inheritances, sabotaged educations, spread lies to communities about children who dared to be different. Each application reminded me why this work mattered more than any personal vindication. We hired a team of counselors and caseworkers, many themselves survivors of family rejection, to evaluate applications with the combination of compassion and pragmatism that ensured funds went to those ready to transform pain into purpose. 6 months after the gala, I found myself in an unexpected place, my grandmother's grave, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, holding a bouquet of her favorite yellow roses. The headstone read, "Eleanor Whitmore, beloved grandmother." And I traced the letters while updating her on everything that had transpired. I told her about the thousands of students now attending college through her memorial fund, about the young woman from Alabama, whose parents had thrown her out for refusing an arranged marriage, and who was now pre-med at Northwestern. I told her about the boy from Idaho, whose family had beaten him for being gay, and who now ran a shelter for LGBTQ youth funded by the foundation. I told her that her legacy lived on in every life transformed by the love she'd shown me when no one else would. The cemetery visit led to an unexpected encounter when I noticed someone else placing flowers on a grave 3 rows over. Janet Rodriguez, Victoria's divorce attorney, recognized me and approached hesitantly. She explained that Victoria came here every week to visit our grandmother's grave, but always at different times, hoping to avoid me, while still needing to connect with the one family member who'd shown her kindness. Janet mentioned that Victoria had started volunteering at a women's shelter, using her own story of marital deception and family dysfunction to help others recognize toxic patterns. The information sat heavy in my chest, a reminder that cruelty's victims often became its perpetrators until something broke the cycle. Thomas Crawford and I began meeting regularly for what started as business dinners. but evolved into something deeper. He understood the particular weight of building success on rejection's foundation, the way triumph could feel hollow when you had no one from your past to share it with. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared understanding rather than the desperate need for validation that had characterized my family's connections. He made me laugh with stories of his own family's ongoing attempts to claim credit for success they'd tried to prevent, and I found myself genuinely happy for the first time since grandmother Eleanor's death. The legal proceedings against my family continued their slow grind through the justice system. James pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testifying against other executives who'd participated in the embezzlement scheme. He received 5 years in federal prison, his fall from executive vice president to inmate number complete. My parents declared bankruptcy after losing multiple lawsuits from creditors and investors who'd been defrauded. They moved to a small apartment in Florida, their society friends having abandoned them like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The Christmas card they sent me, forwarded through lawyers, went straight into the trash unopened. A year after the gala, the Sterling Foundation held its first anniversary celebration. This time, the guests of honor weren't billionaires or politicians, but the young people whose lives had been transformed by opportunity meeting preparation. Maria, the pre-med student from Alabama, gave a speech about how the foundation had saved not just her future, but her life when she'd been contemplating suicide after her family's rejection. David from Idaho announced that his shelter had helped 50 young people escape violent homes in its first 6 months. Their stories, multiplied by hundreds, created a tapestry of triumph that made every moment of my own journey worthwhile. The evening's surprise came when Marcus Chen took the stage to announce his own $50 million donation to the foundation. Melinda taught me that mentorship isn't charity, but investment, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Every person we lift up has the potential to lift thousands more. This isn't just about healing individual wounds, but transforming how our society understands family worth and potential. I'm honored to support this mission and challenge every successful person here to remember who believed in them when no one else would, then to become that person for someone else. As the anniversary gala wound down, I found myself on the same balcony where a year ago I'd prepared to face my demons. This time, instead of rehearsing revelations, I simply stood quietly watching Chicago's lights sparkle like earthbound stars. Thomas joined me, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders against the cool night air. We didn't speak for several minutes, both understanding that some moments transcended words. The city below bustled with millions of stories, some of triumph, others of tragedy, most mixing both in measures that made life beautifully complex rather than simply cruel. My phone buzzed with a message from Sandra containing the latest numbers. 1,500 students funded 300, graduated 50 new businesses started by foundation recipients. The ripple effects spread wider than we could track, each success story inspiring others to believe transformation was possible. But the message that stopped my breath came next. Victoria's application to volunteer as a mentor has been approved by the board. She'll be working with young women escaping abusive marriages. The committee felt her story, properly channeled, could help others recognize patterns before it's too late. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the last walls around my heart crack like ice in spring. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and reconciliation didn't mean returning to toxic patterns. But perhaps, just perhaps, healing could be mutual rather than solitary. I typed back a simple response: schedule a meeting. Neutral ground. 1 hour limit. Let's see who she's becoming rather than who she was. It wasn't a promise of sisterhood restored, but an acknowledgement that people could change if given both consequence and opportunity. The deeper truth that emerged from this journey wasn't about revenge or even justice, but about the alchemy of transformation. Every cruel word they'd spoken had become fuel for achievement. Every locked door had taught me to build my own keys. Every attempt to diminish me had only clarified my worth in ways their approval never could have. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying them, but outgrowing the need for their destruction. Success wasn't about proving them wrong, but proving myself right. And family, I'd learned, wasn't about blood, but about who showed up when life showed its teeth. As Thomas and I left the gala together, walking past the spot where my family had humiliated who they thought was nobody, I realized the final victory. I no longer saw that space as a crime scene, but as a birthing room where my true self had finally been revealed. The girl they'd called worthless had built an empire. The daughter they'd discarded had created a new family of chosen souls. The nobody they'd dismissed had become somebody who mattered not because of wealth or revenge, but because she'd transformed poison into medicine that could heal others walking similar paths. The valet brought my car, a modest Tesla, rather than the Lamborghini my success could afford, because ostentation had never been the point. As we drove through Chicago's streets toward the lake house, I'd bought not for its prestige, but for its proximity to Grandmother Eleanor's favorite walking paths. I thought about the thousands of young people who would wake up tomorrow knowing someone believed in their potential. Some would succeed spectacularly. Others would struggle and perhaps fail. But all would know that rejection by blood didn't mean rejection by life. All would understand that worthiness wasn't inherited, but intrinsic, waiting only for recognition and nurture to bloom. My story, I realized, had never been about me at all. It was about every person who'd been told they weren't enough by people who should have told them they were everything. It was about proving that cruelty creates warriors, not victims, if we choose to fight rather than fall. It was about demonstrating that the best revenge is a life so well lived that those who tried to destroy you become footnotes in a story they'll never fully comprehend because it required vision they never possessed. Most of all, it was about hope, that most dangerous and necessary of emotions, surviving even in soil poisoned by those who should have been gardeners rather than locusts. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility and purpose. There would be more galas, more students funded, more lives transformed. There would be wedding plans with Thomas, who'd proposed not with ostentation, but with quiet certainty on Grandmother Eleanor's birthday. There might even be reconciliation with Victoria, carefully bounded and conditional on continued growth. But tonight, driving home through the city that had given me refuge when family gave only rejection, I felt something more valuable than vindication: peace. The war was over not because I'd destroyed my enemies, but because I'd outgrown needing enemies at all. To those still trapped in families that cut rather than nurture, remember this: your worth exists independently of their recognition. Your potential transcends their limitations. Your future belongs to you alone, and the greatest revenge against those who tried to break you is to build something so beautiful with the pieces that observers can't tell you were ever anything but whole. The journey from nobody to somebody isn't about changing who you are, but about revealing who you always were to eyes finally brave enough to see. And sometimes, just sometimes, that journey requires leaving those who birthed you to find those who believe in you, trading blood for bond, and emerging stronger for the alchemy of that exchange. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey of transformation and triumph. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear that their current circumstances don't define their future potential. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when someone's disbelief in you became fuel for your success, because I believe our stories of overcoming can light the path for others still finding their way. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in second chances and new beginnings, and subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it, but by your courage to claim it anyway. Until next time, keep building your empire, one brave choice at a time.